Hello and welcome, it's Chris from Christopher Holt Training, and welcome to this week's tutorial where we're going to be talking about the psoas muscle and a psoas stretch. Now throughout this tutorial, first of all we're going to focus on anatomy of the psoas. Then we're going to talk about what the hip does and how it affects lordosis, and how a tight psoas can affect lordosis, and also how a loose psoas can affect lordosis as well. And then in part 3 we're going to go on to the final part, which is actually doing the stretch and understanding why we're doing it the way we're doing it, but that will come through learnings part 1.
Before we get started with the tutorial, I just want to quickly mention my social media, which you'll see in the top right hand of the screen. It's Twitter at Christopher Holt, Facebook Christopher Holt Training, Instagram Christopher Holt, and YouTube Christopher Holt. So please do come along to any of those, like, follow and subscribe. It'd be great to have you on board. Also, please do comment below anything that you might have learned, found interesting, or a question about any of the information in the tutorial. Alternatively, if you look to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a URL, which is also in the description below, and it's to my How to Correct Lordosis ebook. In it, you'll learn about lordosis itself and other closely related conditions. You'll also learn what a healthy lumbar spine posture is and what a hyperlordotic or lordotic posture is. You'll learn how lordosis affects different areas of the body, like the hips, the legs, and the feet, and how to begin treating lordosis as well with exercises, stretches, and everyday activities, and also how to bring all of that together into a therapeutic workout. So it's not just an ebook, it's a manual that gives you the knowledge to get started, but also the skills. So please click the link below to find out more about the ebook, and if you choose to purchase, you won't be disappointed. Thank you for watching, and back to the tutorial.
It's a quick lesson in the anatomy of the psoas. We don't have to spend a lot of time doing it, but we will just quickly cover where it is in the body and essentially what we need to start thinking about when we're stretching. So at a very basic level, the psoas joins onto all 5 of your lumbar vertebrae here. It then moves up into T12 and then moves on to the diaphragm as well, which is the muscle that helps you breathe. So that's the start of the muscle up here. What it then does is it obviously goes down through the abdomen, through the pelvis, and joins onto the inside at the top of the femur, which is the bone of the upper leg. So by understanding that anatomy, we can start to understand about the type of stretch that we need to do. It needs to be a stretch that spans this area. So that's sort of part number 1. Now, when we are stretching, what we want to be focusing on is moving the end of the muscle away from the start of the muscle. So I talked about the start of the muscle being here and the end of the muscle being here. So when we get onto part 3 and we start talking about the stretch that we're going to do, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going into this type of position. So we're going to be taking the end of the muscle, which is down on the inside of the femur here, away from this area. If we were to go in the opposite direction, I've brought the end closer to the start. But what we want to do is take it further away. So that's what we're going to be focusing on when it comes to part number 3. We're going to be adding in a few extra bits as well, because it's not just as simple as a leg movement, or it can be that simple, but we're going to add a few bits to it just to make it a little bit more of a specific psoas stretch as well. In part 2, we're talking about how the psoas affects lordosis and how it affects the lumbar spine. And then that will help us again further understand what we need to be doing when it comes to the stretches or the stretch that we're going to be performing. So when we come into this position, if we've got a tight muscle, this leg isn't going to want to go further back like this. So in order for us to get our leg back here, what we'll tend to find is we'll tend to overarch that lumbar spine. So where you may already have that sort of position, that's the body keeping the end of the muscle close to the start. If we could get up into this position and flatten off the lumbar spine, then that's an automatic stretch straight away. So when we come into stretching, what we need to be doing is fixing this into position, so fixing the lumbar spine. So it may mean if you've got an exaggerated curve, you may have to pull the tummy in just to flatten it off. That will be the start position of the stretch. What we would then do is then extend the leg back, but also we want to try and maintain this position of the torso. So we're trying to keep the spine in alignment. We then get all of the movement from the hip. What that helps us do is that then starts to help us isolate the psoas off because there are other muscles of this area. But if we can get into that position, it's going to start to isolate that muscle off. And then when we come into part number 3, there's going to be an extra bit that we're going to add to it to really focus in on that psoas. Part 3 is the stretch for the psoas. So what we want to be focusing on is the steps that we've talked about before. Number 1, we want to take the end away from the start of the muscle. So we want to be coming into this position. The second thing is we want to be holding the stomach in, so that keeps that part of the spine as flat as we can make it, or at least a normal curve. So it pulls in there. So we combine those, and then we can start to go into the stretch. So what we're going to do, now you can do this using something to balance if you need to, or you can just do it freestanding. So what we're going to do, if we are stretching the right psoas, that's the right leg that goes back. So what we're going to do, we're going to sort of go back into this split stance. We're going to bend the front knee, and we're going to bend the back knee. What we're then going to do, because we now know that the psoas starts up the 5 lumbar and then it moves into the T12, so the thoracic part of the spine in the middle part of the back, and onto the diaphragm, what we're going to do is we're going to try and lengthen and straighten this upper part of the spine as well. And how we're going to do that is we're going to come up with the arm, and then what you might find is you might then find the stretch comes from this position here, more so up through here. If you can feel it coming up through here, then you're starting to get the psoas stretch. There's a couple of other things we're going to add in as well. So we come into this position, we raise the arm up over the head, we aim to try and feel the stretch coming up through, so we really get that extension through the upper back, but we're still holding the tummy. Now what you might find is that because it also joins onto the diaphragm, is that you start to have a very short breath. So what we need to then do is start relaxing the breathing and start making that breathing so we're able to get sort of 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. Because if we can relax that breathing, it's going to relax the diaphragm muscle, which is again going to help relax the psoas muscle. So there's a lot of bits going on here, but what we've really got to focus on is getting that stretch up through this part of the abdomen. So again, we come back into this split stance, bend the front knee, bend the back knee. What we then do is lift the arm up, we come into this position. We may start to feel the stretch coming up, but what we're then going to do is we're going to lean over to the side, and then we're just going to rotate backwards as well. And then what we're starting to do now is we're getting that full length of the psoas opened out. Again, we're relaxing the breathing, so 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. We would hold that for about 15 to 20 seconds. You can relax out of the stretch. So you wouldn't fully come out like I just did, but you might just come up into this position, across and around. You would hold that for 15 to 20 seconds. You might then just come out, just release, and then back into the stretch again. So if I just do that facing forward so you can see what it looks like from the front. So again, we would split the stance. We would come into this position. Again, we're holding the tummy tight, trying to keep the back as flat as we can make it. We then lift the arm up to extend the upper back as well. We lean to the side, and then we rotate round. Now, if you do need to balance, you could just have something here that you could put your left arm on, but you would hold for about 15. You would come out, just relax off. If you need to put the arm down, and then come back in, around, and then allow that to stretch. If you find it easier, you can do it down on the floor. That's absolutely fine. But what we want to try and focus on is coming up, because it just gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to move around. To summarize everything that we've talked about, so from part 1, the muscle begins on the lumbar part of the spine, T12, and the diaphragm. It then goes all the way down through the abdomen and onto the top of the femur, which is the bone of the upper leg. So now we know the anatomy. How it affects the back or the spine is if we go into extension, if the hip can't get that extension, obviously it's going to try and get it from the back. So it's going to create that hyperextension, which is essentially what's happening within lordosis. So what we then need to do is we then need to stretch that muscle. So what we can start to do is pull in tight here, take the leg back, arm up, lean to the side, roll round, and the main place that we want to be feeling that stretch is up through the abdomen here. If we can feel it down here, then fine. We may be a little bit tighter in rectus femoris. We may be a little bit tighter through through iliacus. And there may be some quadriceps sartorius that may have a bit of tightness as well. So if you can't feel it here, don't worry. It might just be that you've got tightness elsewhere. So hopefully that's been of help. Hopefully it gives you something that you can now go away and start doing. You can start opening out your hip flexors and you can start opening out your psoas muscle as well. So thank you for watching. My name is Chris from Christopher Hole Training. I will speak to you in a future video.